Before conquering the world, Alexander risks losing everything, not because of the Persians, but because of his own father. Philip II has just subdued Greece. Power now rests with him, and Alexander looks like the obvious heir. Then, something changes. A new marriage, a potential new son. And for the first time, Alexander realizes the throne may not be his. At the Macedonian court, blood isn't enough. Power matters most. Alexander doesn't need to conquer the world yet. First, he has to win the right to rule. But what happens when his father is the one challenging his claim to the throne? Alexander is born in Pella in 356 BC, but his story begins earlier. Between 357 and 356 BC, Philip II marries Olympias, princess of the Molossians of Epirus. This isn't a private match. It's an alliance meant to secure Macedonia's western frontier and bind the kingdom to a powerful dynasty. Alexander enters the world as the product of politics, not just a household. The court he grows up in is already a machine of power. Philip, who over his lifetime will marry at least 7 times, rules a polygamous monarchy where succession is never truly secure. Pella is the kingdom's political center, but it's also where ambitions, kinships, and rivalries coexist every day. From the start, Alexander is shaped by 2 figures. On one side is Philip, wounded, pragmatic, always weighing decisions in terms of utility and risk. On the other is Olympias, an Epirot princess, devout, fiercely attached to her son. She isn't just a mother, she's a political presence, fully aware of her rank and of what her child represents. A Macedonian prince is not educated like a young Athenian. Before books, there's hunting, weapons, riding, discipline, and a constant competition with other nobles. In that world, ruling means imposing yourself. Even before Aristotle, Alexander has 2 important tutors: Leonidas, austere and severe, and Lysimachus, closer to the Homeric world. Through them, he absorbs a heroic image of himself. Achilles enters his imagination early, not yet as a philosophical model, but as a figure of greatness and pure glory. Around his birth, extraordinary, almost divine stories begin to circulate, but they should be treated for what they were: court legends useful for building prestige.
Did you know that most people who watch our documentaries aren't subscribed yet? If you enjoy animated maps and history, join our community. Leave a like and subscribe so you never miss the next episodes.
During adolescence, something begins to take shape in Alexander beyond training and drill. At court, a story circulates about Bucephalus, the horse no one can mount. The animal is nervous, violent, unmanageable. And the price, according to tradition, is enormous: 13 talents. Alexander watches. He doesn't force the horse or try to dominate it. He understands that Bucephalus is afraid of his own shadow. He turns him toward the sun, calms him, and mounts. From that moment, Bucephalus won't be just a horse, but the companion who will follow him through much of his life into the Eastern campaigns. The episode already reveals his character: a cool head, sharp intuition, and the ability to notice what others miss. Even the name, probably meaning ox head, sticks, and so does the line attributed to Philip: Macedonia is too small for you. It's perfect for building the legend, but it should be treated as literary tradition, not a quote we can treat as word-for-word fact. Soon afterward, Around 343 or 342 BC, Philip entrusts his son's education to Aristotle. The place is Mieza, not far from Pella. It's a political decision as much as a cultural one. The future heir must be shaped as a Macedonian prince, but also integrated into the Greek world. Here, Alexander studied Homer, ethics, politics, geography, zoology, theater, and medicine. Above all, his horizon expands. Macedonia is no longer the center of his world. Asia Minor, Persia, and India come into view. In these years, a core group of young nobles forms around him. Among them, Hephaestion and Ptolemy. They are companions in training before they are companions in war. In this setting, Achilles stops being a classroom hero and becomes a model for life. Swift glory, personal risk, eternal memory. The tradition of Alexander's personal copy of the Iliad, the one he will later carry with him, begins here. With Aristotle's education and Achilles as his mirror, Alexander stops thinking of himself as only Philip's son. He begins to think of himself as someone meant for more. In 340 BC, while Philip is campaigning against Perinthus and Byzantium, Alexander is about 16 and is left as regent in Macedonia. It isn't a ceremonial role. He has to administer the kingdom's center, keep order, and respond to frontier trouble while his father fights in the east. Philip's goal is clear: control access to the straits and straighten Macedonia's position in northern Aegean. Soon after, the Maedi, a Thracian border people, rebel. Alexander intervenes, suppresses the revolt, and founds a city called Alexandropolis. It's a brief episode, but politically important. For the first time, he acts not as the king's son, but as someone who punishes, occupies, and refounds. Even the name matters. It's the first city directly tied to his own. 2 years later, the decisive test comes. In 338 BC, at Chaeronea, Macedonia and the Greek coalition face each other in the clash that will decide Greece's fate. On one side stands Philip's army, on the other, Athens, Thebes, and their allies. The numbers are debated, but a cautious estimate is roughly 30,000 to 35,000 men on each side. Alexander is about 18. He isn't an independent commander yet, but he's no longer just a pupil. The sources suggest he played an important role in the Theban sector of the Macedonian line. But the essential point is this: at Chaeronea, Alexander fights for the first time in a truly decisive battle. On the Theban side stands the Sacred Band, an elite corps of 300 men. Its destruction symbolically marks the end of the Peleus' ability to stop Macedonia by force. But for Alexander, Chaeronea means something more. It's the moment his political adolescence ends. He is no longer just a prince in training. He is an heir who has already watched Greece fall. After Chaeronea, Philip stands at the height of his power. He has imposed Macedonian supremacy over Greece without destroying Athens, reduced Thebes' political weight, and in 337 BC, organized a new Greek order through the League of Corinth. Nearly all the Peleus, except Sparta, enter the system. Philip becomes hegemon and commander of the future war against Persia. In that setting, Alexander, already tested at 18, looks like the natural successor. And that's exactly when the succession reopens. In 337 BC, Philip marries Cleopatra Eurydice, a young woman of high Macedonian rank and the niece of Attalus, one of the most influential men in Philip's political and military system. In a polygamous monarchy, a marriage like this isn't private. If a male child is born from the union, the dynastic equation changes overnight. Alexander is Philip's son, but he is also the son of Olympias, princess of Epirus. In a court where bloodlines decide power, that fact alone can make him vulnerable. The breaking point comes at the wedding banquet. Ancient sources say Attalus, perhaps drunk, raises the toast that hints at the hope for a more legitimate heir, a fully Macedonian one. The line only makes sense in context inside a succession triangle. Alexander reacts violently. Philip loses control, and the scene spills into public view. The dialogue reported by later tradition shouldn't be taken word for word, but the fact is clear. The dynastic conflict breaks into the open. From that moment, the court is no longer united. On one side are Philip, Attalus, and the new queen, Cleopatra Eurydice. On the other are Alexander and Olympias, who see their position threatened. That's the paradox of Philip's success. Just when the kingdom looks stronger than ever, its center becomes unstable. The Persian campaign is close, but before the army can even depart, the king has to face an open succession crisis. After Chaeronea, the enemy is no longer outside. It's already inside the palace. After the wedding banquet, the break becomes real. Olympias leaves Macedonia and returns to Epirus, to her family. Alexander withdraws from court and spends time in Illyria as well. It's a turning point. The heir who, until recently, looked like Philip's natural successor is no longer at the center of power. His status remains, but it is no longer guaranteed. In the months that follow, father and son reconcile, but only on the surface. In public, they appear united again, while the court keeps splitting into factions. In this climate, a lesser-known but historically important episode appears, the Pixodaris affair. Pixodaris, satrap of Caria, seeks a marriage alliance with a Macedonian royal house and offers his daughter to Aridaeus, Alexander's half-brother. Aridaeus isn't the favorite in the succession, but the fact that he's being used in a negotiation at this level is enough to set off alarm. If Philip is positioning another son through diplomacy, then the line of succession can truly change. Alexander decides to intervene personally and sends trusted men to derail the arrangement and offer himself as the bridegroom instead. Philip's reaction is harsh. He blocks the negotiation, rebukes his son, and cracks down on Alexander's circle. Some companions, including Ptolemy, Nearchus, Harpalus, Arigius, and Laomedon, are driven from court. One thing is clear: Alexander is no longer just a hot-headed young man nursing wounded pride. He is already a player in international diplomacy, and Macedonia's dynastic crisis is now a geopolitical question that reaches into Asia Minor and the Persian sphere. In 336 BC, at least in public, the family presents itself as united. Philip is at the height of his prestige. The expedition against Persia is ready, and Macedonia appears stronger than ever. But the question of the heir is not resolved. Beneath the image of stability, the succession fight continues. In public, father and son appear united again, but now the real conflict lies elsewhere. Public image no longer matters. The royal house is split, and a blade is enough to change history. In 336 BC, Philip II is assassinated in front of the entire Macedonian court. In an instant, power changes hands. Alexander is only 20 years old, and the kingdom he inherits is anything but stable. Behind him is a divided dynasty. Around him, powerful, ambitious generals. Ahead of him, a Greece waiting for the right moment to rebel. Philip's death doesn't bring an orderly succession. Alexander has to move fast, eliminate rivals, consolidate power in Macedon, and above all, prove he's more than an heir. Because in the Macedonian world, being born king isn't enough. You have to assert yourself as one. And when Greece tests the new king, Alexander answers with a decision that changes everything. But how does a 20-year-old turn a succession crisis into absolute rule? By 336 BC, Philip is at the height of his power. He has imposed his dominance over most of Greece and is already preparing an expedition against Persia. The celebrations at Aigai, the ancient dynastic capital of the Macedonians, are meant to showcase exactly that: a strong kingdom, a stable dynasty. The occasion is the marriage between Cleopatra, Philip's daughter, and Alexander of Epirus, Olympias's brother. It's a public, solemn ceremony staged before the Macedonian elite and representatives from Greece. Philip steps forward in full view as a ruler without rivals. And that's when Pausanias appears. He's a somatophylax, one of the king's bodyguards. The sources point, first, to a personal vendetta. Pausanias believes he was wronged by the men close to Attalus, one of Philip's leading generals and a central figure in the new faction tied to Cleopatra Eurydice. He accuses the king of denying him justice. But Attalus represents more than a private feud. Philip's new marriage to Cleopatra Eurydice could produce, in the eyes of the court, an heir considered more fully Macedonian. And that heir could threaten Alexander, the son of an Epirot princess. And that tension doesn't come out of nowhere. A few months earlier, at the wedding banquet for Philip and Cleopatra Eurydice, the rift had already exploded in front of the entire court. Attalus raised a toast to the birth of a legitimate heir, openly hinting that Alexander, Olympias's son, might not be legitimate enough. Alexander reacts in anger. Philip, drunk, tries to intervene, but stumbles and falls in front of everyone. It's humiliating, and it makes one thing clear: the succession is no longer certain. Not long after, Olympias leaves the court. Alexander withdraws as well. The dynastic rift is now wide open, and when Philip dies, that simmering tension becomes a real crisis. Ancient writers suspect there was more behind the attack. Olympias' name comes up often. Alexander's far less, and his direct involvement is not proven. Pausanias strikes and tries to flee, but he's killed almost immediately. And that matters. With the assassin dead, many answers die with him. Now the question is, who will take power? Alexander is about 20. He is proclaimed king by the Macedonian assembly and the army. In Macedon, blood helps, but it isn't enough. A king has to be recognized by his own men. Then come the funerals at Aigai, the sacred heart of the Macedonian dynasty, solemnly closing the age of Philip. After the acclamation, Alexander understands one thing immediately: inheriting the throne isn't enough. In Macedon, there is no fully settled dynastic system. he has to prove he's firmly in command and that no challengers remain. One rival is Amyntas IV, son of Perdiccas III, the older brother of Philip II. In theory, he's the last direct representative of the line that could have claimed the throne. The young king has him executed. More complicated is the case of the Licentians, a powerful noble family from Upper Macedonia. Some are dealt with immediately, especially because their names surface among the suspicions surrounding Philip's murder. Alexander of Licentius, however, is spared, at least for the moment, perhaps for political convenience. According to Justin, he was among the first to recognize Alexander as king. Then there's Attalus, one of Philip's leading generals, the uncle of Cleopatra Eurydice, and a man with contacts in Athens. He isn't dangerous only because of his personal prestige. He's dangerous because he could become a rallying point for anyone who wants to reopen the question of succession. And he's already in Asia Minor with a Macedonian advance force. For Alexander, leaving him alive is too great a risk, so Attalus is put to death as well. Olympias moves in parallel. The sources describe her as ruthless toward Cleopatra Eurydice and her young daughter, having them killed. The new reign is consolidated with an internal settling of scores. Once his control in Macedon is secure, the young king turns to Greece. In Thessaly, his opponents try to block his path at Tempe, between Mount Olympus and Mount Ossa. Alexander avoids a head-on clash, takes the army along a tougher route, and appears behind the Thessalian barrier. That maneuver is enough. The Thessalians submit and recognize him as their leader. From there, he moves down toward Thermopylae, the unavoidable gateway into central Greece. Control that corridor, and you control access to the south. Alexander occupies it without needing a major pitched battle, and he immediately strengthens his position in the Panhellenic order. The next stop is Corinth. Here, he's reaffirmed as leader of the League of Corinth, the alliance Philip built to hold together almost all the Greek city-states and lead the war against Persia. Sparta stays out, but the rest of the system holds. By the end of 336 BC, he's no longer only king of Macedon. He's already Philip's political successor in Greece. In 335 BC, Alexander has been king for only a few months, but his rule still isn't secure. To the north and west, raids by the Thracians, the Triballi, and the Illyrians destabilize Macedon. So he launches his first independent campaign with a clear goal: to secure the frontiers. He leaves Amphipolis and marches northeast into territory controlled by Thracian tribes. He faces the Thracians first. Macedonian army advances with roughly 15,000 to 20,000 men, infantry and cavalry, against tribal groups that are numerous but less organized. They cross the Haemus Range, where the Thracians try to block the pass by pushing wagons down the slope into the Macedonian line. Alexander holds formation, absorbs the impact, and counterattacks. He forces the pass and proves something right away. The new king can fight on rough ground, not only on open plains. Then he turns against the Triballi. He defeats them on the Liginus River and drives his army all the way to the Ister, the great Danube. There he crosses at night, attacks the Geti on the far bank, and forces them to retreat. This isn't just a border raid. It's a show of force beyond the usual limits of Macedonian control. After the fighting on the Ister comes more serious news. To the west, the Illyrians are on the move. the Macedonian army swings towards Pelion, where Alexander faces Cletus, son of Bardylus, and Glaucius of the Talanti. They command larger forces, probably between 20,000 and 30,000 men. It's one of the most dangerous moments of his first campaign. The terrain is against him, a narrow valley ringed by heights held by the enemy. The Macedonians are down on the valley floor with a very real risk of being surrounded and cut off. Alexander doesn't lose control. He keeps his formation tight and maneuvers under pressure, preventing panic. He manages to disengage without breaking up the army, then waits for the right moment. When the enemy disperses, he strikes again. He hits decisively and shatters the coalition. Here you can see what he inherits from his father, and what is uniquely his: the same strategic ruthlessness, but even greater speed, and a higher appetite for risk. But just as Alexander is winning in the Balkans, in Greece, some people are already starting to believe he's dead. While Alexander is still campaigning in Illyria, a persistent rumor spreads through Greece. The new king is dead, or has suffered a crushing defeat. It's the news many have been waiting for. If Alexander can't return, the system Philip imposed could collapse with him. The first to react is Thebes. The city rises up, recalls the exiles, besieges the Macedonian garrison trapped in the Theban citadel, and tries to reignite a broader Greek revolt. The rebellion grows out of three forces coming together: hatred of Macedonian control, the desire to erase the order Philip built, and the conviction that his son has neither the time nor the strength to intervene. In Athens, anti-Macedonian voices reemerge. The city sympathizes with Thebes, listens to Demosthenes, and follows events closely, but hesitates to commit all the way. No one wants to end up on the wrong side if Alexander turns out to be alive. And this is where the young king shows his resolve. From Illyria, he marches south at a speed that shocks the Greek world. He reaches Thessaly in 7 days, and just 6 days later, he's already in Boeotia. The news of his arrival almost outruns his army. Thebes rebelled counting on distance. Alexander erases that advantage. When he appears outside the city, Alexander doesn't attack right away. He brings a force of roughly 30,000 infantry and 3,000 cavalry. The Macedonian corps is 6 taxis of the phalanx, about 9,000 phalangites, supported by light infantry. Inside Thebes, the rebels may be able to muster 12,000 to 15,000 men, but not all are troops of the same quality. And the Macedonian garrison in the Cadmea is still there, besieged, but not defeated. Thebes is still a major city in central Greece, with a population in the tens of thousands, but its alliances are fragile. Athens sympathizes and sends weapons. Sparta moves only as far as the Isthmus of Corinth, and no one manages to turn political support into a real relief army. Alexander knows it, so he offers surrender again, leaves an exit open, and tries to separate the rebels from the rest of the city. At this point, the message is clear. If Thebes is destroyed, it won't be blind impulse. It will be a deliberate calculation. After negotiations fail, the assault begins, perhaps early on Perdiccas' initiative, and quickly turns into a coordinated attack. Macedonian troops press from the outside, while the garrison in the Cadmea moves from within. For Thebes, that means fighting on 2 fronts at once. When part of the defensive line collapses, the battle spills into the streets and turns into urban combat. From that moment, the revolt is lost. The number the sources repeat most is often stark. More than 6,000 Thebans are killed. The survivors, with few exceptions, are sold into slavery. Much of the city is leveled. Temples and sacred places are spared. Even the house of Pindar, the most famous poet of Thebes, is left standing. It's a striking contrast. Culture and religion are spared, while the city's political life is erased. Alexander is sending a very clear message. Thebes is the first major rebellion against his power. Destroying the city is meant to paralyze the rest of Greece before it even thinks about rising against him. The contrast with Athens is decisive. Athens is not annihilated. Alexander treats it far more cautiously, for the prestige it still holds in the Greek world, for its political usefulness, and above all, for its fleet, which will prove valuable in the war against Persia. At Thebes, he uses terror. With Athens, he uses caution. The effect is immediate. The formal decision on Thebes' fate is put before the Council of the Greeks. Macedonian garrisons remain in key places: Corinth, Chalcis, and the Cadmea itself. The road to Asia is finally open. Thebes burns. Athens backs down. Greece falls silent. Now, Alexander is no longer just Philip's son. He's the man who terrorized Greece, and now he can turn toward Persia. In 334 BC, Alexander crosses the Hellespont with barely 37,000 men. Ahead of him stands the Persian Empire, richer, larger, and stronger. In Asia, he doesn't find Darius. He finds satraps, fleets, fortresses, and an entire system built to stop him. At Granicus, he nearly dies. At Issus, he drives Darius into flight. And in between, he learns one hard truth. Victory means dismantling Persia, not just chasing Darius across Asia. So how does a 20-year-old king turn one landing in Asia into the beginning of Persia's end? In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander leaves Europe for Asia with an army of about 37,000 men, roughly 32,000 infantry, and just over 5,000 cavalry. Before he departs, tradition says he gives away much of his property to his companions. When they ask what he's keeping for himself, he answers, hope. But this expedition isn't driven by glory alone. Alexander is continuing Philip's project, presenting himself as a leader of the Greek world against Persia and seeking prestige, plunder, and long-term political stability. Taking the war into Asia also keeps both the army and Greece focused firmly east. What he's facing is no ordinary kingdom. It's the Persian Empire, a state of perhaps 25 to 35 million people, compared with roughly 4 to 6 million in mainland Greece. It's an immense system, organized into satrapies, able to raise taxes, troops, and resources on a continental scale. Militarily, the gap is just as stark. Persia can mobilize armies of up to 100,000 men. In short, Alexander is attacking an empire vastly larger than his own kingdom. The main crossing is between Sestos and Abydos, barely 2.5 miles apart. Most of the army makes passage on about 160 triremes and transport ships, but Alexander turns even this crossing into a political and symbolic act. At Elaeus, he honors Protesilaus, the first Greek to die after landing in Asia in the Trojan War. The message is obvious. He wants his own landing to be luckier. And the instant he touches Asian soil, he hurls a spear into the ground, as if the conquest begins with that first step. Next comes Ilium, ancient Troy, about 19 miles from Abydos. At Ilium, Alexander doesn't act like a tourist. He's trying to step into myth. He offers a sacrifice to Athena, lays his own arms in the temple, and visits Achilles' tomb. Hephaestion honors Patroclus. None of it is accidental. Alexander is telling himself, his men, and the Greek world that his war in Asia begins where their greatest war, the Trojan War, began. Alexander enters Asia not just as a conqueror, but determined to rewrite history. At first, Alexander doesn't face Darius. He faces the satraps and commanders of Asia Minor. Before the clash, the Persian leadership gathers at Zelea, and Memnon of Rhodes emerges as the clearest mind in the room. He argues against an immediate battle. Instead, he wants to strip the land bare, deny the Macedonians food and fodder, and wear Alexander down on land, then exploit Persian superiority at sea. Soon after, at Miletus, the Persian fleet can field about 400 ships against roughly 160 for the Greeks. Memnon has grasped the war's central point, but his plan is rejected. The satraps choose to fight at once, and it will prove a mistake. In late May 334 BC, the two armies meet on the Granicus River, about 60 miles from Troy. The river isn't wide, but its banks are steep, sometimes 10 to 13 feet high. A frontal attack means scrambling up under direct enemy fire. Alexander does it anyway, throwing himself into the melee. The sources stress the point. He fights in person, and the battle nearly costs him his life. He's struck on the head and almost cut down from behind, until Cletus the Black steps in and saves him. It's the kind of moment that turns instantly into legend. After the victory, the Persian hold on the region starts to crack. Alexander sends 300 Persian suits of armor to Athens, dedicated to all the Greeks except the Spartans, a propaganda move. Then the Persian structure in Western Asia Minor begins to collapse. Duscalium is evacuated. Sardis surrenders without a fight. Mithranes, the garrison commander, hands over the city, the citadel, and the treasury. You can already see Alexander's two sides: the warrior king who nearly dies in the river, and the politician who turns a tactical win into the opening of Western Asia Minor. After the Granicus, Alexander turns to the sea. If Persia keeps the Aegean ports, the expedition remains exposed. So he goes from Sardis to Ephesus, calls back the exiles, tears down the pro-Persian oligarchy, and restores democracy. In Ephesus, liberation and conquest coincide. Alexander replaces local elites with an order loyal to him. From Ephesus, he marches south towards Miletus, about 28 miles away. And there, his strategy comes into focus. The Greek fleet holds the island of Lad with about 160 ships. 3 days later, the Persian fleet arrives with 400. The balance of power at sea is stark, roughly 2.5 to 1 in Persia's favor. Parmenion proposes risking a naval battle. Alexander refuses. He knows he is weaker at sea, and he decides to defeat the Persian fleet on land by taking away its ports, arsenals, anchorages, and allied cities. It is a crucial choice. From this point on, the campaign is no longer a sequence of battles, but a systemic war against the Achaemenid Empire. He then moves on to Halicarnassus, about 35 miles from Miletus. Here, he launches the expedition's first major siege. Defending the city is Memnon of Rhodes, the most capable commander serving Persia in Asia Minor. The resistance is fierce. Fighting turns urban and comes in brutal waves until parts of the city burn and the Persian defensive system in the region finally breaks. This is where Ada of Caria enters the story. She hands him Olinda, adopts him as her son, and after the capture of Halicarnassus, she is restored as governor. Alexander understands that military victory alone is not enough. He must also appear legitimate. To stabilize Caria, he leaves behind 3,000 infantry and 200 cavalry. Yet the war is far from over. Memnon escapes and carries the conflict into the Aegean, where Persia remains strong. Darius gives him command of the fleet and the whole coastline. Memnon seizes Chios and moves to Lesbos, where he lays siege to the northern city of Mytilene. After Halicarnassus, Alexander continues along the coast of Lycia and Pamphylia to block every anchorage. Telemussus, Xanthus, Patara, and Phaselis are drawn into his system. It's a deliberate choice. Control the southern coast of Asia Minor and make the enemy fleet unusable. In winter, he reaches Gordium in Phrygia. It's not only a new stage of the campaign, but a symbol. In the citadel stands the famous cart of Gordius, tied with a knot that tradition says only the man destined to rule Asia can loosen. The best-known version says Alexander cuts it with his sword. With that gesture, he casts himself as the man destiny has chosen to open Asia's road. At Gordium, reinforcements arrive. About 3,000 infantry, 300 cavalry, 200 Thessalians, and 150 Eleans. Alexander passes through Anchria, crosses Cappadocia, goes beyond the Halys River, and heads for the Cilician gates. He takes them with a night march so swift that the Persian garrison flees. He then moves towards Cilicia across the Anatolian plateau and the mountain passes, more than 285 miles in a straight line. And at Tarsus, the most unexpected blow comes. Alexander, exhausted by the march and perhaps after plunging into the icy Cydnus, falls gravely ill. The doctors think him lost, except Philip the Acarnanian, who prepares a remedy. At that moment, a letter arrives from Parmenion, one of his generals, warning that the doctor may be bribed by the enemy. It's not certainty, only suspicion. Alexander chooses to trust anyway. He takes the cup, drinks the medicine, and at the same time hands Philip the letter so he can read it. It's a powerful scene. It doesn't prove Philip is a traitor, it proves the opposite. And it shows how Alexander is willing to risk everything, even when the threat doesn't come from the battlefield. At this point, the war shifts. Until now, Alexander has beaten satraps, garrisons, and coastal cities. Now, however, the great king truly enters the story, Darius himself. Before that, something decisive happens. In 333 BC, Memnon of Rhodes dies, the best Persian strategist at sea. With him, Persia loses its clearest strategist. And from that point onward, the war passes more directly into Darius's own hands. The Persian king moves down towards Syria with a great royal army. Ancient sources give enormous figures, 300,000, even 600,000 men. They are clearly exaggerated. Even so, Darius still commands forces far superior to Alexander. A deserter, Amyntas, warns him, It's better to force Alexander to fight in open country, where numbers really make the difference. But Darius chooses differently. He chooses the Ammanic gates, outflanks the army, and finds himself in Alexander's rear. He takes Issus, where the Persians capture and kill the sick it left behind. At that point, the situation reverses. Alexander is no longer advancing toward the enemy, because the enemy is now behind him. The two armies are forced to turn and face each other. Between Tarsus and Issus lie about 75 miles, but the decisive point is not the distance. It is the ground. Before the Pinaris, between the sea and the heights, the space narrows. And in that narrow space, much of the Persian numerical advantage is squeezed out. Alexander understands it immediately. On the left, near the sea, Parmenion, the most experienced commander in his army, comes under heavy pressure. On the right, Alexander strengthens the striking wing, angles part of the line toward the heights, and then attacks decisively toward the Persian center. This is the key moment. Around Darius fights his closest men, the king's kinsmen and part of the Persian guard. But when the Macedonian attack reaches the center, not even that chosen corps can hold. The great king loses the field. He flees, first by chariot and then on horseback, leaving behind his bow, shield, cloak, and royal chariot. When the battle is over, Alexander visits the wounded, honors the dead, and then treats Darius' family with respect. The mother, wife, and children retain their rank. Tradition preserves an episode. Sisygambis, Darius' mother, mistakes Hephaestion for Alexander because he is taller. Alexander does not humiliate her. He reassures her. It is a small detail, but it matters. He is no longer only the avenger of the Greeks. He begins to look like a claimant to the throne of Asia. Yet the war is not finished. Darius is alive. The Persian fleet is still in play, and the Achaemenid Empire has not collapsed. The choice now is different. Pursue the fleeing king, or conquer his empire piece by piece. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. In the next video, we'll see Alexander push south, face the siege of Tyre, and change the face of war. Because after Issus, victory still isn't enough.